About a decade ago, Amy and I were in Rome, not Georgia, Rome, Italy, celebrating our 20th anniversary. And some of the time we're just, doing touristy stuff, eating a lot of gelato. Other times we're on this really strict schedule where we're visiting these ancient sites. One of the sites that I loved, one of my favorites, one day we were in the catacombs. The catacombs are underneath the streets of Rome. And so the way that you get in is you actually go through a modern church at street level, and then you go down. And underneath that modern church in Italy is actually this ancient church, like 1,000 years old. And then even underneath that church, and they're still excavating it, underneath that is like 20,000 square feet of meeting rooms and apartments for these ancient Christians. And so we're on this tour, and it's interesting, in Rome, most of the tour guides are not Christians, and that is interesting. What's even more interesting, most of the tour guides are not actually even historians. Like, they know a lot, clearly, but the stuff they don't know, oftentimes they just make it up just to sound smart. So we're in the catacombs, and I'm a talker, so I'm just making conversation with our tour group, and I just offhandedly make this comment. I'm like, these burial sites are really small, and then our tour guide's like, oh yes, the ancient Christians. Very short people. And I'm like, I look at Amy, I'm like, I don't know if that's true. And then, we keep going. And then, the further you go into the catacombs, on the walls, you see all this artwork and paintings. And these are these really sacred things for us. These like the shepherd and the sheep and Daniel and the lion's den. So we're really appreciating this. And a guy in our group, I think, was just poking fun. He's like, oh, the ancient Christians, not very good artists, right? And I get a little annoyed at that kind of stuff, because I'm just like, is this how it's gonna be? Like, are we defined? Are Christians defined by these really silly things? Like when the church was getting persecuted, a long time ago. We're being persecuted around the world, but and the king is like, bring me the Christians, and the people are like, what do the Christians look like? And he's like, just bring me the short people that can't draw. I'm like, is that what is happening? And so what came to my mind, if we did just a man on the street interview, just somebody we didn't know in our city, and we were like, hey, tell me what do you think about Christians? Like, what would be the defining marks of what a Christian is today? Listen, we're going to get a lot of really weird answers, right? We're going to get answers like, well, just look for the really angry, polarizing people. Look for the people that have got a weird fish symbol on the back of their car. Look for the person that looks like and acts like Ned Flanders, and if you're like, you're looking for a Christian pastor, just look for the guy with super skinny jeans and a faux hawk, right? We go on and on. What the weird caricatures of what a Christian is, and many times true. Right? And so what I want to do just for a few minutes is I want to just drill down on the single characteristic, the single definer of what a Jesus person is about. And this might surprise some of you, but the single definer. And then when we unpack this text, then I want to use that one definer, this one characteristic, and I want to use that as the lens by which we see this political landscape. And if you're new around here, these 2 weeks we're talking about politics, mostly because we need more parking. So some of you're going to leave here after this. It's crowded. We're spending these 2 weeks because we want to be a gospel people. We're saying this is not our home. We're not driven and owned by our political landscape. We're not putting our hope in this country. We're not putting our hope in our Constitution. We're putting our hope that there is a future for us that's not defined by this time and space. And so today we're gonna look at the political landscape through this one lens. And so if you got a copy of the scripture, go ahead and turn with 1 John chapter 3. 1 John chapter 3, we're going to begin with verse 10. And if you're new to the Bible, this is in the New Testament. It's like the end of the Bible. It's like, just go all the way to the end and then just turn left, okay? 1 John chapter 3. John the Apostle says this, by this it is evident who are the children of God. So here's how you're going to know who the Jesus people are. By this it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. For this is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. So John is saying, okay, we flow from one of two families. We're either of God or we're of the devil. And he's like, one of those is your dad. And then he sort of implies this question, how do you know which one is your dad? And then he gives this simple rule. And he's like, here's how you know who your dad is. Like, you're going to look like your dad. You're going to carry the DNA of your dad. So if God is righteous, and what he says here, he's righteous, he's pure, he's filled with gospel love, and we're of God, then our lives are going to grow. I mean, like, we're not nailing it, but our lives are going to grow with a righteousness. We're going to have a deeper desire for purity. We're going to have a deeper desire for gospel love to define us. So just for clarity, what defines the Jesus person is not party, it's not politics, it's not dress, it's not if you drink free trade coffee or what translation. So many weird things that we lay over our lives. Like, this is what defines you as a Christian. And John's going, no, it's just one thing. Like, how many of you, when back in the 80s, if you were alive, how many of you watched Jerry Springer? Any Jerry? This is a safe place. You can. Okay, yeah. I love Jerry Springer. I was like, this is like my family. But if you've seen one Jerry Springer episode, you've seen them all, because they're only about one thing, right? It's just like, who's the baby daddy, right? It's all it is. It's like, Tanya Lee, come on out. And bring your little boy JoJo. And there's JoJo. He's 7 years old. He's got fiery red hair, big ears. And Jerry's like, listen, we have done all the work. We got the DNA results. But before we reveal it to our highly anticipated audience who they really care about you, we're going to bring out the potential baby daddies, which were like, how many baby daddies? Like, how many men? And he's like, here are the three guys. Come on out. And here's like Bocephus, and here's, Geraldo, and then Mark, right? And it's like, here are the three guys. And before you even hear the DNA report, you're like, it's Bocephus. He's got fiery red hair, gigantic ears. You're like, that is the baby daddy, right? This is actually what John's saying. In fact, Julian the Apostate, he was an emperor in Rome, he hated Christians. Like, he wanted to stamp out Christianity. He wrote this to a friend. He says, it's a scandal among the Jews. Now, the reason he's saying that is the Jewish people were the first people to respond to the gospel. They were the first Christians. He says, it's a scandal among these Jews that there's not a beggar among them. These godless Galileans, and he's calling them godless because they didn't worship the gods of Rome. He says, these godless Galileans care not only for their own poor, but ours as well. In other words, he's like, I hate these Christians. Like, I'm trying to kill these Christians, but it's really hard because people love them. Like, they're so kind. They're so generous. In fact, if you read any church history, you'll find like crazy stories. Like the Black Plague was hitting a huge portion of the cities of the Roman Empire. And when the Black Plague hit, if you were healthy, you would just leave the city. You would leave your family. You would leave your children. You'd leave your spouse if they got sick. But do you know who would remain in the cities? The Christians would remain in the city. And what they would find is that the Christians wouldn't just take care of the Christians' poor and the sick. They would actually take care of the Roman poor and the Roman sick. In fact, an early writer talking about Christians, he said this: they love each other before they even know each other. So John, the apostle, John's telling us, he's like, listen, you Christians, like people of God, you flow from one of two families. You either flow from the devil or you flow from God. It's two fountainheads. You either have the fountainhead of God that flows into Christ, that then flows into you, where you are a person of Jesus, or you flow from the fountainhead of the devil, and then he's going to say it flows into Cain. We'll read that in a second, which is kind of weird. You might be like, why Cain? Well, Cain was evil. Cain murdered his brother. You can go read about it in Genesis 4. But what he does is Cain and Abel, they're brothers, they're going to worship God together. And Abel, he comes and he brings his first and his best offering to God. And it was a symbol. He's like, I'm bringing my first, my best. It's a symbol of gratitude. It's a symbol of trust. It's a symbol of extravagant dependence, meaning I'm going to bring my first and best, not knowing if there's going to be a second, right? And in doing that, bringing his first and best, God blesses him. God's presence goes with him. And then Cain, what he does is he doesn't bring his first and his best. He brings his basically last and worst. And he does this little religious thing that we all do, kind of trying to cover over it, like, oh, I brought my best. And God's like, not only did you not bring your first and your best, it's a symbol, not of dependence, it's a symbol of self-sufficiency. It's a symbol that you're going to get your way, and yet you want your cake and you want to eat it too. And God's like, no, it doesn't work. And so God rejects Cain. And Cain, as you can imagine, if you read the story, Cain is infuriated and he rejects God. And he's like, God, fine. Who are you to tell me how to live my life? And so he's infuriated with God. And then after he gets angry with God, then he is resentful to his brother Abel, which, by the way, is exactly what we do. The moment you get angry with God and go, God, who are you to tell me how to live my life? All of a sudden, you find yourself getting resentful of the people that do trust him. And you're like, who do you think you are? You think you're better than me? You think you're more righteous? Like, I see, like I'm telling you, I see this all over the place. Hatred from God or hatred to God, a resentment to God that he can tell us what to do, in spite of the fact that he's the God of the universe, always leads to resentment to other people that actually do it, that surrender their lives. And so he hates God, he resents his brother, and then the resentment, it leads to an anger towards his brother, and the anger leads to murder. Now, the question some of you might be thinking is, John, are you saying that all non-Christians are murderers? And the answer is no. And John's not saying that either, the Apostle John. John, like so many of the biblical writers, he's using exaggeration. He's using hyperbole to make a point. And basically what he's saying is that every person that flows out of the fountainhead of the devil, it always flows into self-sufficiency. And when you flow out of self-sufficiency, all that means is given enough time, given enough opportunity, you're going to do what you want to do. You're going to do whatever it takes to get yours. You're going to move as many barriers, remove as many people from your life to get what you think you deserve. And oftentimes that means we'll murder. Like we'll do whatever it takes, even the worst thing. And listen, let me just say this little asterisk here. Don't think yourself so righteous on your own. Like apart from Jesus, every person in the room has 3 decisions from tanking their life. Every person in the room is about 10 minutes away, apart from Jesus, from like shipwrecking your entire life. And so he's like, we flow from the fountainhead of the devil. It's only going to lead to a kind of self-sufficiency. That it's going to take us down this stream, and eventually, given enough time, you stay in that stream of self-sufficiency long enough, you are going to go over the falls, and you're going to crash on the rocks of destruction. So that's the fountainhead of the devil, flowing down the stream of self-sufficiency that leads to death. And then you might be thinking, okay, so what about the fountainhead of God? Okay, well, the fountainhead of God flows into Christ, okay? And some of you are like, okay, finally, he's talking about us. Flows from Christ, and that flows then into the Christian, and that means the Christians, we're the good guys, right? And all the non-Christians, they're the bad guys, and they're murderers, and they kick puppies, right? That's who they are. And like the Christians, we're like amazing, and we're loving and kind and perfect, and God looks down on us, and he sprinkles his fairy dust of blessing on us, and he's like, I'm so glad you're on my team. No, what John's saying is this, is that every person in the room, every person on the planet, we all start in the fountainhead of the devil. The moment you breathe your first breath, it's a breath of self-sufficiency. The moment you take your first steps, it's about you getting credit. And so we flow down this stream of rebellion, this stream in which we regularly consciously and unconsciously, we give the finger to God. And we're like, God, I'm going to do it my way. And I may have checked the box Christian because I'm an American, but at the end of the day, I'm going to live essentially as a practical atheist. I'm going to live my life the way that I want to live my life. And we flow down the stream, heading towards the waterfalls, not knowing what is at the bottom. And yet in God's mercy, in God's grace, I mean, just the fact that he sees you as an image bearer and he loves you, he takes you out of this stream of death, of loss, of destruction. It's the verse that we talked about a couple weeks ago of Colossians 1:13, that he rescues us out of the dominion of darkness and he transfers us into the kingdom of the beloved Son. He only does that because of his grace. He only does that because he's so merciful. And so he looks at you and he looks at me and he snatches us out of this stream heading towards destruction and he transfers us into the stream of grace, into the stream of provision, the stream of surrender. And he does it because he loves us. That's who our Father is. I was thinking about this I was writing this message, and I was reminded of a story that I heard back in 2008, and then I heard it again a couple weeks ago. The story is a guy that I listened to. When he and his friends were in college at Baylor, and they were just like college kids, but like really like pursuing the Lord, pursuing Jesus, sharing the gospel with their friends. And there was this young woman in an apartment complex that they lived in, and she was not a Christian. She didn't know Jesus, and honestly, she had like terrible experiences with Christians. And she's like, I don't want anything to do with Christians. But they were like moved towards her, but they were really careful because she had a really broken past. She had a baby at 16. She had some serious health problems, some of which were of her doing, and then she had like terrible sexual trauma, like just a broken past. And so they were moving towards her, these guys, but they recognized like any man that had ever moved towards her, it was just to get something from her. And so they were like really careful, like just extravagant though in the way that they were trying to love her. So they were like, let us babysit. Let us clean your apartment. You're working 2 jobs, going to school, like, let us help. And so that's what they did. And then in the course of several months, just like being gentle and kind and loving and extravagant towards her, one Friday night, a friend of theirs was playing at an event on campus at this venue. And he said, hey, why don't you come with us? We know you like live music. She was going to the bars all the time, listening to live music. You're going to love this guy. There's a guy named Robbie C. And so she was like, yeah, I'll go. And so they go to this little venue, about 200 people. It's packed out. And about 15 minutes into the event, they realized this was basically a college version of like a purity event, like what was that thing in high school? A True Love Waits rally. And so they were like, oh, we're out. This is going to be terrible. And whatever your experience with those are, some of them are good, some are bad. They were like, this girl's got so much sexual trauma in her past, like this is not going to be good. But they were like, we're going to stay. Like maybe it'll be good. We're just going to just bank on that. So the concert ends, and then this guy gets up to speak. And as he's beginning his talk, he's like, hey, before I begin, he pulls out a rose. And it was this pristine, untouched rose. And he says, I want everybody in the room tonight, I'm going to pass this rose, and I want you to take this rose, and I want you to smell it. I mean, it is an untouched, perfect rose. I want everybody in the room, 200 people, I want everybody in the room, just smell it. Get your hands on this thing. And then as he passes it off the stage to the crowd, it's just going through the crowd, a couple hundred people. And as they're doing that, he just like launches into like his sermon on like the dangers of gonorrhea. And he's just like, let me give you all the statistics and why you don't want to get an STD and it's going to be bad and nobody's going to want you. And then about 15 minutes later, the rose finally makes its way back up to the stage. And by this time, as you can imagine, 200 people have touched it, smelled it. Half the petals are falling off. It's broken its base. And he gets the rose and he says, after everybody's touched this, nobody would want this rose. And he's like, many of you, this is your life. This is your sexual history, and nobody would ever want you. And the guy telling the story, he's like, I'm 20 years old, and he's like, I didn't have the courage that I wish I had, but he's like, I wish, 20 years later, I wish I would have stood up and interrupted that guy and just screamed and say, Jesus wants the rose. Do you know who wants that broken life? Jesus wants the broken life. And I tell you that because that's the message of John. John's saying, no matter how long you've been down this path of brokenness, of loss, of self-destruction, of rebellion, of hatred of yourself and other people, Jesus comes for you. And the grace to snatch you up, it's so that you'll be made whole. That's what love does. And so John, with that in mind, he finishes this text by saying, verse 16, he says, by this we know love. So here's how you know. Here's how you know that you've been snatched up. Here's how you know that the redemption of Jesus has taken hold in your life. He's like, by this we know that he laid his life down for us, that we now ought to lay down our lives for other people, for the brothers. Meaning because we've been rescued, because we've been redeemed, because we've been snatched out of darkness, put into the light, because we were broken and now we've been made whole. Because that has happened, now we live lives of redemption. We're now on divine rescue missions. And then he finishes this way. He says, but if anyone has the world's goods, meaning if you're wealthy, and every person in the room today, in the scope of global perspective, in the scope of the earth, every person is wealthy. He says, so if anybody has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his what? What does it say? Heart, sorry. I got a hole through it. Yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? The answer is it doesn't. Little children, let us love in word, or let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. So let me tell you, just kind of put my cards on the table. When I was prepping this message, I wrote this 2 weeks ago. I first worked Romans 13. That was my plan. And Romans 13 is a passage, like it's a sharp edge of God and government. And my plan was like to bring out the 2x4, just like hit you over the back. And yeah, I got some correction from the Lord. He's like, John, you bring out the 2x4 a lot. Some of you are like, and the correction really was like, John, give him the definer. Like, why do they keep doing this? Like, why do they go against the grain? Why do they give up their rights? Why do they say no to appetites? Like, why? I mean, you're not getting anything for being a Christian. I mean, as time goes on, you're just going to pay a greater price for being a Christian. It's like, why do we do it? The reason we do it is because someone has paid the ultimate price for us. Redemption. There's a ransom that has been paid for you and I. You and I were lost, and Jesus has gone to great lengths to see you come back home. And so because of that, we live lives of redemption. But that lens now has to apply to this landscape of politics. Like, how do we live lives of extravagance? How do we live lives of honor? How do we live lives in which this redemption that has taken root in the majority of the DNA of our life, how does it take root in this place of politics? How does it work? So I want to give you 3 pastoral notes, and I'm going to be as gentle as I know how. Some people are like, John, why do people keep coming to Hope City? And I'm like, ridicule. It's just I just keep ridiculing them. I just keep, no, it's a joke, guys. So through the lens of love, here's what I want us to do. We've got 30 days leading up to this next election. First is this, is you and I, we are to honor all people. We are to honor all people around you, around me, no matter their political leading. Here's what Peter says, 1 Peter 2. This passage that we're looking at, this was written during the most, one of the most painful times in the life of the church, where they were facing the most heat, the most persecution, had the least amount of rights. So with that in mind, listen to what Peter commands the church. He says this, live such good lives, live such holy, live such extravagant, live such loving lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that he visits us. So this political season, friends, listen, it's almost over. It's going to be over in just a blink. And I just want to plead with you. Do you like, this political season is going to be over. Do you know what's going to remain after this political season's over? Your people are still going to remain. Like the people around your dinner table are still going to be here. The people you go to work with, the people, your ridiculous social media friend, like they're your friends, right? They're still going to be here. And so listen, can I just plead with you? Do not spend your relational and your spiritual capital on something so temporary as an election. Second pastoral note, same passage, is submit to authorities. This may be the most offensive to some of you because honestly, rebellion has become virtuous in our country. But it's a deep sin. Peter continues, he says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor, who by the way was killing Christians as the supreme authority, or to governors, who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good, by loving, by living a life of gospel extravagance, you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. So Scripture teaches us unequivocally, God is the one, not our electoral college. God's actually the one who puts people in places of power, in places of authority. And the book of Jeremiah says it's in his purview to raise up people and to extinguish people. It's his purview to raise up nations and to extinguish nations. He's the one doing all of it. And so while we live in this world, we've got a temporary green card, knowing that like one day we're going to go home. This is not our life. This is not our home. And knowing this is a temporary life, why in the world would we give our best attention, our greatest affections to something that's not ours? And so in the instruction of living as exiles, as sojourners, that God gave to the people living in exile in Babylon, he says, do good to the city. While you're here, do good to the city. Live peaceably with other people. Last is this, and this may be the one, I've got a little 2x4, okay? This is my love language, guys. Listen, friends, and just receive this. Don't presume to know what God's doing in this election. Deuteronomy 29:29, if you're memorizing scripture, I hope that you are. This is a verse. He says, the secret things belong to the Lord, and the revealed things belong to us and our children. So there are things that are just secrets. There's things that God's like, I'm not revealing to you. And the reason is like, you're a man. And your ways are not my ways. Your thoughts, as small as that, certainly not my thoughts. And so like, this is why I've been pleading with you for months. I mean, well, let's be honest, as long as I've been your pastor. I've been pleading, like, just get off the news. Get off of social, quit watching political, like you've spent 48,000 hours listening to a political pundit on Fox News or CNN or wherever you go, and somehow you think you've got a crystal ball in which you can see what's coming. Oh, well, if this person gets in, then this is gonna happen. And if this person gets in, oh my goodness, it's gonna be the apocalypse. Listen, friends, you have no idea what God's doing. We have no idea how God is moving his pieces on the earth for his purposes. And honestly, all of it's gonna be for our good. So let me tell you, like whoever you're voting for or not voting for, you may think, okay, if this person gets in office, it's gonna be good for the church. And it's gonna be good for our rights, for the church. But listen, you have no idea. Oftentimes when the church, historically, when the church has married itself to a political structure, it always goes bad for the church. It causes a lukewarmness to rise up. And by the way, the church in America is already sick. We're already in hospice care. And so you think more rights? Do you think a warmer bed is gonna be for our good? Well, maybe, I don't know. I'm not gonna presume what God's doing. But it might not be good. And then this person that you're like, well, if this person gets in office, it's gonna be bad for the church. Well, you have no idea what God's doing. The church actually might need a little bit of heat. We might need to face a little bit of persecution because that's how we thrive. Now, you'd be a fool to pray for persecution. And my point is this, it's the command of Paul in 2 Corinthians 4. He says, let us fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, what is unseen is eternal. We have no idea what God's doing and what he's accomplishing in the earth. But one thing we do know is this, is that he's in charge. And his purposes are righteous and good. So however you vote, you can vote with a clear conscience. You can say, I'm gonna vote my convictions, but at the end of the day, God is ruling the world.